Welcome to the first episode of You Like Jazz presented by ThreewindSports. I want to give a quick little shout out to the wonderful saxophone player who played that intro you just heard. That is my good friend and colleague, Caleb Dries, wonderful saxophone player. I'm very grateful for him and his willingness to record that intro for us. This podcast is for Utah Jazz fans and NBA fans alike. We're going to be covering the ins and outs of everyone's favorite Utah-based professional sports team. Episode 1 will be a shorter introduction episode to get a feel for things, but I intend to release longer episodes starting next week, so I hope you enjoy. A quick little disclaimer, I'm pretty sick. I get bad spring allergies, so if it sounds like I'm talking through a funnel or a tunnel, or I'm just breathing really hard throughout this episode, I apologize in advance. That's because I haven't blown my nose in a little bit. Since this is episode 1, I think that we should probably start with a season recap of the Utah Jazz, of course. I think we're going to start from the very beginning, and by very beginning, I mean very beginning of the season, the off-season. We're going to start with the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert trades. The Donovan Mitchell one is the first one on my to talk about list. Of course, we traded our multi-time all-star Donovan Mitchell. We got Lauri Markannen, Ochai Agbaji, Colin Sexton, and a bunch of picks and pick swaps, etc. And then in the turnaround this season, Donovan Mitchell has a fantastic year. He's an all-NBA player, best year of his career, plays out of this world. Very clearly didn't want to be in Utah. Very clearly is playing better because he's trying harder because he's in a new spot. And then he gets to the first round of the playoffs and he plays horrible and he loses, and you begin to question, were all of those losses for his playoff teams in Utah the same thing we're seeing now in Cleveland? He's just not that great of a playoff player, even though that's what he's known for some reason, even though he consistently loses. I think we won that trade. If you want me to be completely honest with you, Lauri Markannen was the most improved player. Ochai Agbaji is a fantastic rookie, and we got a ton of picks. So I will mark that one up as a win for us, and honestly a win for Donovan Mitchell. I know he lost in the playoffs, but I think he himself would say that was a win for him. And personally, I'm fine with where we are, so I'd say that was a win for us too. And then you got the Rudy Gobert trade, which for me personally is a lot more close to my heart. I loved Rudy way more than I liked Donovan. Rudy is one of my favorite players of all time. I am a consistent Rudy Gobert apologist. But in that trade, we got Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, a couple other players, and then a bunch of picks. We totally fleeced Minnesota in that one too. And so we look at this season, and Walker Kessler is a top 3 in Rookie of the Year voting, and we get a lot of value from Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley in that trade to the Lakers. And Rudy Gobert has one of the worst years of his career, and the Timberwolves lose to the Nuggets in the very first round of the playoffs when people were like, oh, they might be a top 5, top 4 seed to end the season. They weren't. They barely got in, barely got through the play-in tournament, then lose in a sweep in the first round. So I look at that as a massive win for us, and I look at it as a pretty big loss for Rudy, which does make my heart hurt. I still love Rudy. I hope he comes back to the Jazz one day and retires with us. But I'd say this season was a much bigger win for us than it was him. After those two big things, I'm going to rifle through a couple things here. Hiring Will Hardy. He was a great first-year coach. I think he has some room to improve. I think he needs to decide on what his priorities are, winning or tanking. I know that's a front office thing mostly, but I think the coach has something to do with that. So I'd say that. And then the Lauri Markannen resurgence. First-time All-Star. He was fantastic this year. He won Most Improved Player. I am looking forward to having him in the years. I'm wishing him luck. He's in Finland right now in the military, serving his mandatory Finnish military stint. But I'm glad we have him. I'm looking forward to him being a even better player next year. Then we look at our rookies. We got Walker Kessler finishing as a top 3 voter in Rookie of the Year voting, the best defensive rookie in the league. And if we want to be completely honest with ourselves, and I don't think this is a hot take, he was better than Rudy Gobert this year, which no one saw coming. It's pretty incredible, actually. That kid is a stud. He's going to be fantastic in this league. And then you look at Ochai Agbaji, who we got in that trade that we got Lauri Markannen in. He would have been great for this Cavaliers team. He has shown a ton of potential. He's incredibly efficient when he plays, and he has a definite and locked-up spot on this team going forward. I think he's not getting nearly enough love. If you're in the sports card industry, if you collect sports cards, if you invest in sports cards, I would personally buy as much Ochai Agbaji as you can because it is cheap, cheap, cheap right now, and you can make a good little sum of money whenever he ends up being an all-star because I think he's going to be. Then you look at the team as a whole. The season starts out and we are just playing great. No one expected it. We jump out. We're the top team in the West for the first couple of weeks of the season. And in the back of my mind, I know we're not going to stay that way. We're not going to be that good throughout the year. We don't have a good enough team to do that. And so I'm like, oh no, this is going to end up being really bad. We're going to fall in this limbo zone where we're not good enough to make the playoffs or be competitive in the playoffs, and we're not bad enough to get a really high pick in the draft, which is what we should have done. And we found ourselves in that zone, and we slowly got worse throughout the season. We began to consistently lose games in the second half of the season, and we ended up finishing 12th in the West, which, like I said, is not good enough to make the playoffs, not even the play-in, but you're still not bad enough to get a top 5 pick, which is the area that teams stay in that never win. They end up in this little limbo zone that the Jazz found themselves in this year, and they never win. So I'm scared we're going to continue with that trend. Hopefully next year we pick a side. Do we go full competitive, make the playoffs, try to compete, or do we tank and get a good pick? I personally think we should tank probably for a couple more years, if I'm being completely honest. All right, let's take a break from the action to give you a couple words from our presenting sponsor. And by presenting sponsor, I mean me and ThreewindSports. This podcast is presented by ThreewindSports, and more podcasts are going to come out sooner rather than later, presented by ThreewindSports. ThreewindSports is a multimedia sports blog comedy podcast network. It's a mouthful, I know, but you're going to want to get on the bandwagon right now. ThreewindSports is on the come up. I think you're going to love it. If you love this show, you're going to love our other ones. You're going to love our blog. Please go check those out. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. All right, I think that about wraps it up for all of this past season talking that I have to do, coverage that I have to do. Next thing I want to move on to is the offseason, what we're going to look like in the future. And I think the most important thing to look at right now as we sit here right now today are free agents that we currently have, and then free agency, what we're going to be aiming for when we get there. So let's talk about that. All right, I'm going to go through every single one of our guys who are currently free agents, tell you what I think we should do with them. First off, we're going to start with Damian Jones. We got him midway through the year in the Lakers trade. He's a backup center on a bad team, but I think we should re-sign him and let him play backup center next season. He won't cost the team anything at all, and he's honestly better than our other options. Then you have Udoka Azubuike, who I love. I've always loved Udoka. I loved him when he played for Kansas. I loved him when we drafted him, but he's just not good. And when he does, he's always hurt. And when he isn't hurt, he's just not good. So I do think we should let him walk. It is sad to see. I wouldn't be mad if they chose him over Jones. They're probably around the same level, but Jones is probably more consistently healthy. So I would go with Jones over Azubuike. But again, I love Udoka Azubuike. Then we have Rudy Gay. Please, 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 please. This is a direct message to the front office. Whatever you do not re-sign Rudy Gay. He needs to retire. And he has been the worst player on the Jazz for multiple seasons now, despite getting actual legitimate rotational minutes. I don't get it. I haven't got it for years now. The thing about Rudy Gay is he wasn't even that good when he was good, if you know what I'm saying. But years ago, when he was in his prime, he was a guy who threw up shots, was incredibly inefficient, put up decent numbers, but hurt the team more than he helped. And now we look at him now, and he can't even do the things he was good at. He needs to be not only off the Jazz, but he probably needs to be out of the league entirely. Next thing, someone that probably no one cares about, Juan Toscano-Anderson. Give or take. If we keep him, we keep him. If we don't, we don't. Not a bad rotational piece, but I really couldn't care less if we don't keep him. Then you look at Talen Horton-Tucker, who I think is a definite re-sign. He had a great year for us this year. He has value on the trade market. It looked like he didn't last year when we got him. I think he has higher value now than he ever did playing for the Lakers. And he offers a spark plug off the bench. He fits the timeline. He's a youngish guy. So yeah, I think we should re-sign Talen Horton-Tucker. Finally, the beloved Jordan Clarkson. This is a touchy subject because he doesn't fit the timeline. He's an okay player. I mean, a well above average player, but he's not an all-star. He's going to come off the bench. But everybody loves him. And so you look at a guy like this, and you wonder how much he wants to be in Utah. If he really wants to be there, we can have him. I think if he's willing to take a pay cut, we resign him. All right. we can't risk our future on Jordan Clarkson, but I think he's a great locker room guy to have. Everybody loves him. So if we can convince him to take a little pay cut because he loves being in Utah so much, because who doesn't, right? Then, keep him around. Let's keep Jordan Clarkson around. But for the time being, I think he is up in the air. If he wants more money, I think you have to let him go. All right, let's talk about free agency targets. I think this is an incredibly weird discussion because there's not very many good free agents in this market, but there are two guys that I would love to see come to Utah. I think one of them's pretty, it could happen, and the other one is not. So I'm going to start with the one that's not, Cameron Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. I don't think Brooklyn will let him go. He's been great for them. He was great for Phoenix. But if they slip up, I would love to get a 3-and-D wing like Cameron Johnson who fits the timeline. That's important. He's around the same age as Markkanen. He's going to age at the same rate as Markkanen because that's how aging works. And I think he would be fantastic, a fantastic addition to our team. A great, great wing, plays great defense, shoots the ball well. I would love to have Cameron Johnson. Now let's talk about my realistic goal, and this is Ayo Dosunmu. And I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. I loved watching him at Illinois, and I heard them say it a million times. I think that's how you say it. Ayo is a fantastic player. He hasn't been getting nearly enough love on the Bulls. Assuming the Jazz don't want to move forward with a PG rotation of Colin Sexton and Chris Dunn, I would love it if we got a young defensive-minded PG who has a good head on his shoulders like Dosunmu. We already have Chris Dunn. This kid is just the better version of Chris Dunn. He is a free agent. I think the Bulls are probably going to look to re-sign him. But if they don't, or if they offer him too low, I would love for the Jazz to grab him up. He's a fantastic player. He gives us exactly what we need. He fills the hole that we are missing right now at the one position, and I would just love to have him. He seems like a good locker room guy. Seems like he's pretty nice. I've loved watching him since he was at Illinois, and I would love for him to be on the Utah Jazz. All right, that's all the free agent talk I want to get into. Now I want to look at next season goals. I think this team needs to do everything in their power to avoid what happened to them this year, which means we need to pick a slant from the very beginning. They cannot find themselves in the same predicament they found themselves in this past season when they got caught in that limbo zone that we talked about earlier, where they're not good enough to be a playoff team, they're not bad enough to have a serious shot at a top pick. And like we talked about earlier, if you stay in this limbo zone, the team will never make the jump up to being a contender, right? Because your players are only getting older and older. You're not getting any great guys in the draft, and you're not contending and bringing in free agents. So you're in a very weird area. But I think it's easy to solve. I think we have an easy solution because all you have to do is build a competent lineup around this new all-star, this most improved player in Lauri Markannen that we've got now, and it works. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then tank, right? It's that easy. Don't make it harder than it is. And I actually built a lineup here that I think would be perfect for next season. I've got Ayo Dosunmu starting at the 1 with Colin Sexton backing him up. And then I've got Ochai Agbaji starting at the 2. Lauri Markannen starting at the 3. Cameron Johnson backing him up if he were to join us. Or actually, if Cameron Johnson were to join us, he would start at the 3. Lauri Markannen would start at the 4. If not, Lauri Markannen would start at the 3, and Kelly Olynyk would start at the 4. In the perfect world where Johnson comes to Utah, Kelly Olynyk would back up Markannen at the 4, and then Walker Kessler is your starting 5. I did all of that hard work to make that starting lineup, and I did even more, and I gave you the bench. I put Jordan Clarkson on the bench, Talen Horton-Tucker on the bench, Chris Dunn on the bench, Damian Jones on the bench, plus any of those guys that I mentioned earlier that are backing up people. And there you go. There's a very competent lineup that is not only able to compete right away, because we've seen how good these guys are. Not only are they able to compete right away, they're also young and fit a timeline of growth, right? So that's a perfect lineup. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you tank. Now, you have to make sure when you're running this lineup, you don't start old guys over young guys, and you don't play old guys over young guys. Jordan Clarkson should not start over Agbaji. I don't care if he's better right now. Kelly Olynyk should not start over Walker Kessler, and I don't care if you think he's better right now because he's not. Walker Kessler is already leaps and bounds better than Kelly Olynyk. That is my current strategy for growth for the coming year. Guys I want to target, guys I think we should let go, guys we should keep, and I think we're going to have a fantastic, fantastic year, and I think that's all I have to cover if I'm right here. With that all being said, I want to thank you for listening to episode 1 of You Like Jazz. Be sure to tune in next week for episode 2, when we take a deep dive into the upcoming draft and what the Jazz should be looking for when making their picks. You can find You Like Jazz on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, with new ways to listen coming soon, like YouTube. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at You Like Jazz Pod, and thanks for listening.